Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Catherine. I'm an adult services librarian here at the South Huntington Library. We're so glad you could join us today for our webinar on seed saving. And I'd like to introduce Renato Stafford. He's our organic gardening expert, and he's going to show us how we can save seeds from this year's harvest. Renato, take it away.
All right, good morning. Thank you. So today what I'm going to go over is everything that I do with saving seeds and having seeds available for next year's planting in the spring. So I'm going to talk about big seeds and little seeds, how to save the different types of seeds that we're growing for the vegetables that we're growing right now. So what I do every year is I save all of the seeds that are my favorites of the year, and I'm always in my gardens always planting heirloom varieties of plants because then I know I can save my seeds for the following year. So hybrids, I completely stay away from anything that's genetically modified, and that way I know when I'm going through my garden that I could pick out anything that is growing that I love, that's doing well, and I know I could save the seeds on those. So I'm going to show a bunch of images that are going to show you some of the things that I've been doing with seed saving and growing, and then any questions that anyone has related to seed saving or starting plants, feel free to ask me any question at all regarding what's going on in your garden or anything related to this program. So the first thing that I think about when I'm saving seeds is looking for the biggest and nicest and most beautiful specimens to save the seeds on. So in my garden today, I don't know if you can see the size of this thing. This is a green striped zucchini that I pulled out of the garden. I've been watching this for a while because this is the one that I'm going to be saving my seeds on because I want the biggest, most beautiful zucchini. So what happens with my zucchini plants is as they grow, I prefer to pick my zucchini like about, 12 or 16 inches, but every now and then one of them gets away from me and I don't see it. And that's going to be the variety.
Excuse me, Renato, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you get a little closer to the microphone?
Okay.
That's better.
How's that? All right.
That's much better. Thank you.
So let me see if I can make my volume come up a bit. I think I'm at the max. Okay, so so I'm always looking for the nicest varieties of the different vegetables that I'm growing to save the seeds on. So that's important. And I know that I could save the seeds on anything that I have growing in my garden. So all the large seeds, it's fairly simple to save them. The smaller seeds are a little more tricky, but I'll show you the techniques that I have to save the smaller seeds. And then there's seeds that I'm going to buy every year because it would be really too much for me to try to save them. So I'm going to go over all of that, and then I'm also going to go over when it comes time to starting your plants. And here, you're saving your seeds for next year. I'm going to go over how I start all of my plants. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I'm going to speak as I show you some of these images, and then I will answer any questions. I'm going to go ahead and share. Okay, so how I got started in everything that I do with organic growing and teaching people how to grow their own food all started with this little greenhouse that I had built in my front yard. So what happened with me was it was about this time of the year, and everything started to change in my garden where the tomatoes were dying back, and everything seemed to be coming to an end. And I'm one of those folks that struggle from seasonal depression, is what they call it. So I would just start getting really bummed out that this all this abundance was coming to an end. And so it was about 15 years ago, I built this little hoop house in my front yard. And it's hard to tell from this photograph, but what you have here is was basically, it was my vegetable garden in my front yard, and I had 2 beds, and I turned it into a greenhouse, which enables me to grow right through the winter months. So in the center, you'll see those black crates, and those crates have all of my seed starts that I'm starting in the spring. So this picture was taken in, I think, in March. And I was growing in this right through the entire winter time. So in there, in those center crates, you have my tomato seedlings and pepper seedlings and onions. Now under those crates, I dug down a center aisle that was 3.5 feet deep. And by digging down that aisle, it enabled me to have a passive geothermal convection and grow right through the winter months in this zero energy hoop house. So that's how I got started in it. And when it comes to starting seeds, I don't know what I would do without having my little greenhouse to be able to harden them off and get them going in the springtime. Now, if you don't have a greenhouse, I'm going to show you some ways of doing this, right in your house, right by a southwest facing window. And I could show you some techniques on starting them, but it's really nice to have a layer of protection outside to start your seeds in the spring. So one of the first things that I get started kind of late February is I start my onion seeds. And I said all my onions from seed, I get them to germinate. They start really early, and I get them going first. Now, one of the things about onions that's important is I don't save the seeds on my onions, I buy them. However, if I don't plant all my onions for that year, I don't save them. So onion seeds are not seeds that last long as far as having a shelf life. So they will expire. So any leftover onion seeds won't be reused for the following year. So this is what my onions look like after I take those tiny little hairs and I'm plugging them in the ground and I get them started. You could buy onion starts. They're a little bigger, but I prefer to start them from seed. And, I absolutely just love growing onions. So, the onions that I grow are just so amazing, and I so look forward to them every year. So it's worth the extra work to start them from seed. It's really labor intensive in the beginning. You have to really stay on top of the weeding and keep them happy until they get established, but definitely worth it when it comes time to harvest them. I come from an Italian household, and tomatoes are a big deal in my family. This year I was able to, I think it was one of my best tomato seasons ever. The tomatoes were just magnificent. We had a really hot, dry summer, and the tomatoes were just perfect. All of these tomatoes that you see here, by the way, the zucchini on the side is just kind of to keep the tomatoes from falling off the table. But what I do with the tomatoes is I lay them out on tables in my garage. I'll put newspaper underneath them. So as they start to become ripe, I'll take these tomatoes and I'll put them on these tables in the garage. That way, the newspaper will be a way that I can determine if one of them has a little hole in it or is damaged in some way. You'll see a little moisture on the newspaper, and I'll know to remove that one. So I'll do this and just set up tables like this, and then I'm ripening the tomatoes inside rather than trying to ripen them on the vine. What happens in my garden sometimes is once they start getting too ripe, some of the critters might be interested, some insects, some birds. And so what my goal here is to really grow enough tomatoes to be able to can them so I have them for the whole year. So I'll grow a bunch of different heirloom varieties, for salads and things like that. But really my focus is to be able to jar as many tomatoes as possible. If anyone is interested in canning their own tomatoes, getting this little machine here is really nice. It's Italian-made machine with all stainless steel components. And what it does is it takes the skins and the seeds out. So the skins and the seeds go in one direction and the puree goes in another, and it's really nice for canning. So, we have a lot of fun with this. And this year I canned about, I'm going to say about 200 jars this year of tomato puree. I also canned some whole tomatoes. Now, while this process is going on with the tomato canning, I am eyeballing these tomatoes to pick out the best and nicest specimens for saving seeds. So in the morning when I'm getting the tomatoes ready and I'm getting the jars ready and I'm about to can, I'm pulling out the nicest of each variety and putting them aside because those are the ones I'm going to save the seeds on. So what I'll use is a strainer like this, a metal strainer, and I'll take my San Marzanos and I'll lay them out in all my Italian heirlooms, and then I'll just basically slice them, take my finger to scoop out the tomato seeds with the pulp inside this metal strainer, and then I run it under water. I take my thumb and I just keep pushing the tomato seeds with my thumb through the water, through the strainer, and that will clean the seeds up a bit. And then I slap them down onto a plate, kind of lunch lady style, just turn around and slap those seeds down on the plate, allow them to dry, and then I'm able to scrape them off later and save them. So really simple to save my tomato seeds. Then once they're dry, I get them into a paper envelope and I'll label them, which is really important that they're in paper and not in plastic. The seeds, even though they're dry, they might still have some moisture in them, and I don't want them to mold in storage. So this is what it looks like on that plate after I cleaned up the tomatoes. And I save a lot of seeds. I mean, I'm going to show you in a few moments the bags of seeds that I save. Even though I may not need them all, they do last a long time, and I can share them in my travels whenever I'm running programs or teaching at schools. I can always give away seeds. So I probably have enough seeds to take care of the entire North Fork where I live with tomato seeds. So they start to dry a little bit, and then at some point I'm going to be scraping them off and packaging them. Now, pepper is real easy, same kind of thing. I love hot peppers. It's kind of my favorite thing. Even though my kids, I'll grow the sweet ones for them. I just almost every meal can have something hot and spicy in it. So I grow my cayenne. I grow enough cayenne to dry for the whole year, and I grow enough jalapenos. And I have this really nice recipe of jarring the jalapenos and keeping them for the whole year. So I have hot and spicy, from those two varieties. The cayenne, once you dry them, they can stay just like that. I put them in a big glass mason jar once they're fully dry. And the seeds inside are now ready to go. They're viable. So when I'm ready to plant my cayenne seeds at a later date, I just pull out some of these dried cayenne peppers and the seeds are ready to go for starting. My girls like the sweet peppers, so I'll grow these, they're kind of called picnic peppers, these small, green, yellow, and red peppers. So I'll grow them for the kids. My mom loves eggplant, so I'll grow eggplant for her. I'm not a big fan myself, but I'll save the seeds on those as well. All the large squash varieties of plants, like the zucchini that I showed you, these are all really simple to save. If you look on the top left of your screen, one of the things that I'm really excited about growing in the past few years have been these Long Island cheese pumpkins. So, that's a variety it's a Long Island native that almost got lost because nobody saved the seeds. And, over the years, backyard gardeners would grow them, but the big commercial seed companies weren't offering them, and they almost disappeared from the planet. So I'm a big advocate of saving these, and they make the absolute best pumpkin pie in the world. So, I'm going to see if I can grab one to show you later that I grew, which is it was the perfect cheese pumpkin this year. And already we've started making some pies and some pumpkin soup and some other things with them. So I really enjoy them. I'm always amazed on how long they will last. I can store them in my garage. These cheese pumpkins will last, sometimes almost into the spring. They have an incredible ability to stay, viable, even though, as long as they're not damaged, there's no holes in them, they'll last a long time. But what I do with them, if they see they have some damage to them or they may not last, I usually cut them up, I'll bake them, scoop out the inside and freeze the the flesh of the pumpkin, so I'm ready to make anything throughout the rest of the year. Now, when I save the seeds on these cheese pumpkins, I'm going to save some for replanting, but I'm also going to roast them and salt them and eat the seeds because they're delicious to eat. And they have a lot of health benefits to eating seeds like this. So some of them I'll just eat raw and I won't roast them, and others I'll roast and salt them. So when they come out, they kind of look like this. I'll take the same process of just rinsing them in the strainer, and then eventually I'm going to dry them and have them available, you know, for replanting the following year, or for, you know, just roasting and eating. So zucchini, as you could probably figure out, is one of my favorite things to grow. For some reason, this year wasn't the greatest zucchini season. I don't know exactly why, but I did get some, you know, nice zucchini. I planted 3 rounds of zucchini this year, so I did 3 successions. And succession 1 did the best. The second 2 successions, not as good. I can't really, you know, explain it, but it wasn't the best year. But I did get some, and I'm able to save the seeds on some of these large ones. This is a green striped zucchini that my uncle many years ago sent me the seeds from Italy. I have family that live at the base of Mount Vesuvio in Italy, and they've been farmers for many generations. And so a lot of the seeds that I save are seeds that that my family's been saving for years. And so I am now the next one in line to keep these varieties going. So what I'm looking for with saving the seeds is I'm looking for the biggest, nicest specimen. So on this table, everything in the foreground are all cucumbers. Well, the first one's a zucchini. Everything else is cucumbers. And so you could see when the cucumbers get to that gigantic size and they start turning orange, that's what I'm looking for seed saving. And I'll take a bunch of those cucumbers, and I did that already this year, and I saved all my seeds from my cucumbers. I try to grow enough cucumbers to jar as many jars of garlic, dill, pickles as I possibly can. So about, I don't know, maybe 50 or 70 jars of pickles, something like that every year. But I'm really looking for the nicest ones to save the seeds on. I grew some watermelon this year, had some success with it. It's kind of tricky to grow, but I was able to grow some nice watermelon. And I love seeded watermelon. I really seek this out. So if I can't grow it, I'm looking for growers that are, I mean, seedless watermelon just doesn't do it for me. So I did really well with the watermelon. So I did my second planting of sugar snap peas this year. The first round I put in the ground in March, and we had a great harvest of sugar snaps. And now at the end of August, I put another succession of sugar snap peas in the ground. So hopefully we'll have enough season before the frost comes that I'll have another round of sugar snaps. But anything on the vines that are get mature, that don't get picked, if I have a lot left over, those are easy to save the seeds on. Just allow them to get fully mature. The outer part of the pea will kind of dry up, and you could just pull the peas out and save them. Potatoes are something that only in the past, I'm going to say 4 or 5 years, have I been growing my own white or Irish potatoes. I used to just, you know, I for some reason, it was convenient for me to buy them. And then once I started growing them, I realized that there's absolutely nothing like growing your own potatoes. So now I grow enough potatoes for the whole year. So whatever potatoes that I have that are in storage that we don't eat over the winter time are going to be my seed potatoes for the following year. So if for some reason we eat them all, I have a really nice company that I work with to get my seed potatoes. So I can buy them, but many times I have enough to replant. And the potatoes usually go in right in the, you know, around St. Patty's Day in the beginning of March sometime. The peas and the potatoes are like some of the first things to go in the ground. And so, you know, I'll be looking to, at that end of the winter time, I'll be looking to separate out some of my potatoes that I've grown for the seed for the following year. And this is what they're going to look like. You know, when I have them, they already start growing. And I'll just take them like that whole. Sometimes I'll cut them and I'll put them right in the ground as soon as the ground can be worked. And off I go with my potatoes again in the spring. So with potato planting, what you want is to have two visible eyes on your piece of potato. So if I took these and they had two, eyes that are growing on each one, I could cut them in half. But sometimes I'll just throw the whole potato in the ground like that. They're really easy to grow and one of my favorite things to grow now. Okay, so the potatoes go in the ground in March, and the way I do it is I'll space them out, I don't know, about a foot apart, something like that, and they'll go into each of these rows, and then I'll put straw mulch in between the pathways. And this is a typical way that I would lay out my gardens and the growing spaces. I like to keep my pathways well mulched with straw to minimize the weeds. I would cover these potatoes up, water them, but I wouldn't mulch them right away. What I usually do is allow them. So this picture is like taken in the beginning of March, middle of March, and what I usually do is allow that black, rich, compost-rich soil to heat up and allow these potatoes to emerge quickly from the ground. And then as they grow, I start to mound them where I start adding compost around the plants as they grow. And I find that if I keep doing that maybe 2 or 3 times, keep mounding my potatoes as they grow with compost, I get a considerable yield. I get a lot more than if I just planted them, covered them, and allowed them to grow. So I started doing that a few years back, and this year was a real, an incredible harvest of potatoes. Sweet potatoes are something that I don't quite grow enough of to get through the entire year. They're really good. They usually disappear quickly, but they're a warm weather crop. And so sweet potatoes typically grow like in the Carolinas, South. So in order to be successful with growing them here in our climate, it needs to be really hot. Now this summer was a hot summer, and I'm really optimistic that the sweet potatoes are going to look really nice when I dig them up. I usually wait to put them in the ground. I usually wait sometime in beginning of July, because late June, July, I want it to be really hot because they really are. It's important that the heat is there, otherwise you won't get nice sized sweet potatoes. So I wait a little while before I put them in. I have a company that I purchase them from. I purchase my slips, my potato starts. Rather than me trying to start them myself, it's easier just to purchase them and plug them in that way. There have been times where I have started them, and it's not that difficult to start your own sweet potato slips, but I find buying them is just for the volume that I'm doing makes more sense. Okay, so here I am out in that one of my garden growing areas in East Hampton, and I'm starting to harvest my garlic. This picture was taken in probably the second week in July. So garlic is I think one of my favorite things to grow. It's one of those crops that require very little attention. If you set up everything correctly, setting up the beds correctly with the soil being very rich in compost, and you have a super sunny location, you can grow really nice garlic. So I grow about 250 or 300 pounds of garlic every year, and that's what I need to get through the entire year. When I first started growing, I didn't realize how much garlic we actually use. I cook a gourmet meal virtually every day, and almost every meal has garlic in it. So I figured out over time how much I need, and it's about 300 pounds of garlic to get me through the entire year. So if any of you are interested in growing garlic, I'd be happy during our question and answer part of the program to answer any questions on growing garlic. It's the kind of thing that goes in end of October, early November. So now's a good time to start to find your seed garlic. It's a good time to get the garden beds ready for planting. And I can go over that if anyone has interest in planting garlic this year.
So I like to grow giant garlic. You know, I mean, when I'm cooking, I really want a big, you know, giant clove, a big bulb of garlic. And what I do when I harvest my garlic is I start to look for the biggest bulbs I could find and pull those aside and put those in a crate that's, you know, that's going to be my seed garlic for the following year. So every year I'm replanting some of the garlic that I've grown, and I'm always pulling out the biggest and the nicest varieties and specimens to put aside as my seed. Because when you plant garlic, big garlic cloves make for big garlic bulbs 9 months after you plant them. So I'm always separating out and finding the ones that are the biggest to replant. When I'm putting garlic in the ground, the beds look like this. Lots of compost. You know, soil. It's really rich. I'll put straw in the pathways, and what I'll do is I space my garlic out about 5 or 6 inches apart, and I take a pole and I walk up and down my garden beds. The soil is really loose, very rich in compost, and I poke a hole every 6 inches up and down the entire bed that I'm planting in. So this, you know, it's now spaced out correctly. I poked the hole just about the right depth that the garlic needs to be planted in. The garlic should go in the ground about twice as deep as it is tall, as that clove is tall. So one clove in every hole, cover it up, and then I am good to go with having my garlic for the winter time. So garlic is a wintertime vegetable, and it needs to overwinter. You know, I have heard people, you know, try to plant garlic in the spring, and what you're going to get is a tiny little garlic bulb. It really needs to winter over. So once I plug all of those garlic cloves in, I'm going to cover up the holes with the back of my rake, and then I'm going to straw mulch the entire bed. So it's going to look like this when I'm done. The beds are all mulched. The pathways are mulched. I put some wood chips down in the pathways to even, you know, put another layer to keep the weeds from coming up. And then I water the whole thing in really well and walk away. There's really not much for me to do with my garlic at this point. The straw is important because it keeps the garlic from heaving out of the ground in the winter. If we have a winter time there where there's a lot of thawing and freezing, the garlic can sometimes get heaved up out of the ground and pushed to the surface. So the straw will keep the soil more stable. It'll also prevent weeds from coming up in those beds, and it'll retain the moisture. So there are times where I, you know, barely water the garlic unless we have a severe drought. Sometimes we get a really, you know, severe drought in July, and I might water the garlic a bit. But there's been years when I have not watered it at all after the initial planting and watering it once really well. I would just walk away, and there's not much to do. Garlic is one of those things that is perfect for the absentee gardener, somebody that's not going to be there on a regular basis. You can plant it. If you set it up right, you can walk away from it, and you only have to tend to it just a couple of times of the year. So it's really a nice crop to grow if you have a sunny spot and you don't want a lot of work. The other thing that's nice about it is not the critters don't like it. So you're not going to have issues with mice or moles or voles or squirrels or deer, raccoons, anything really eating it. I don't, you know, nothing likes garlic except for little fat Italian guys like me, I think. So you don't have to worry too much that anyone's going to come and nip away at your garlic, so it can stay unfenced on your property. Okay, now I'm going to talk a little bit about what I do with seed starting and how I go about starting my seeds every spring. So I've saved all of my tomato seeds, I've saved my peppers, I've purchased my onion seeds, I've saved all the other seeds in the garden, and now come springtime, I'm thinking about getting things going. So what I do is I start my seeds in my living room, okay? So this is by a picture window that has a southwest facing window, and I'll take my containers. These are all like 5-inch containers, landscape containers, you know, perennial containers, and I'll fill them up with compost. So I'll go to my compost, I'll take a screen, I'll screen out all the big chunks, and I fill up all of these containers with compost. And then I start to take my seeds and I start to sprinkle them on the surface of each of these containers. So the tomatoes might have, I don't know, maybe 20 or 25 seeds on the surface. The peppers about the same. Maybe the onions will be a little more dense, where I'll have maybe 30 or 40 seeds in each container. And then I will take my plastic misting bottle and with water, and I will mist them and soak them really well. Just keep spraying them, spraying them, spraying them. I'll cover the whole thing with burlap, and I could mist them right through the burlap. The burlap will keep the soil from drying. It'll allow the seeds to germinate. I'll get my kids involved in this. They all get spray bottles, and every day they'll just keep misting them. And my goal here is just to get those seeds to pop, to germinate inside the house. I have a greenhouse, but it's an unheated greenhouse, and I want to have these temperatures in the 70s in order to get these seedlings to start to germinate. I surface germinate all of them, so all of them are right on the surface. I'm not covering any of these seeds. I'm allowing them all to be on the surface, keeping the soil evenly moist until I see that they germinate. And as soon as they germinate, the day that they pop, I'll then take them and I'll just like see that little leg come out, and they're starting to, that first root is going into the ground. As soon as I see this in my seedlings, I'm going to bring them out into the hoop house to go through a process of hardening them off. So these are pepper seeds, I think, that have just germinated. And then after about a day or two, they're going to look like this. These are some tomatoes and peppers. And all of these containers, I will carry them in crates out to my greenhouse, and I'll get them to go through the process of the extremes of the outside environment. So I'll bring them out in the morning. It's above freezing in the hoop house, but it's still cold. And they're going to go through the day. It's going to warm up in there. It's going to be a moist environment. And at the same time, I have all of these greens growing. So I'm keeping everything moist and wet. And the seedlings are going to go through this process of becoming stronger and resilient, because they're going to go through the extremes of the outside environment. So they're going to be cold in the morning. They're going to warm up throughout the day. They're going to get a lot of sunlight. And then they're going to get cold again at night. Now, if I see that it's going to drop down below freezing or even get close, there's been times where I have to take my crate and put these seedlings and bring them back in. I'll usually bring them in the garage at this point and protect them from a hard frost. Now, what I found is with my hoop house, because it's a dugout, I went down and dug down 3.5 feet into the earth. What I get is a passive geothermal convection. It's warmer below that frost line. And so I'm able to keep, even though there's been days where the outside temperature was freezing or below freezing, it stayed just above freezing inside my greenhouse. I don't always like to take a chance with this. So if I see it's getting close to freezing, a lot of times I'll take them out, but there have been times where the forecast said one thing and what actually happened was completely different. And I was surprised to see my seedlings survive and they didn't succumb to the frost. So that's my process of hardening them off and getting them to become tough, strong, sturdy plants to eventually go into the outside garden. The stems are going to be purple. The leaves are going to be a nice, green color, and then they're going to start to see the first set of true leaves come out on each of the plants. Now, if I didn't do this, if I just started them in the house and left them at that picture window, what would happen would be they would become tall and kind of, spindly. They would fall over, and they wouldn't really become a plant that would be capable of being transplanted outside come May. Because I'm starting these in March, and they're eventually going to go in the ground somewhere in the middle of May. So when I'm ready to transplant them, what I'll do is I will separate this ball of seedlings that I have. So here I have these tomatoes, and you could see the seedlings are all compacted in there. And I'll physically work out each one of these little seedlings. And many times what I'll do is I'll transplant them into a 4-inch container. and I'll allow them to get bigger in that 4-inch container. There have been times where I've directly planted them right into the garden if the weather allows. But I like to get them a little more established, so they go in these large containers. I grow them densely, and then I'm going to put them in these 4-inch containers, and I'm going to get them to a place where they're really strong and really happy. By the way, this photo is a project that I'm working on in West Hampton Beach. It's the elementary school at West Hampton Beach, and this is their greenhouse. And so we usually give every student a tomato plant to take home or a pepper plant, and I've been running programs there for a few years. Unfortunately, this year things have changed. I know they got their hands full in the school right now, so hopefully next year we can get back on track with the gardening program. So when the tomatoes are all really looking happy, at this point they're ready to go in the ground in June. I'm sorry, in May. Now, if I can't save my seeds, there are a few companies, and later when we open it up to conversation, there are companies that I like to buy seeds from. One of them that I buy some of my seeds from, or quite a few now, is a company from Italy. It's the Franci Cementi company that has been saving seeds for like 400 years. And I'll purchase seeds from them. They're very high quality. You get a lot for your money when you're buying seeds from this European company. The American seed companies, over the years, I've become less interested in. What's going on in the world of seeds and growing is there's some very large companies in the world that have incredibly large budgets that are looking to purchase a lot of these mom and pop and smaller seed companies. And I always try to, buy my seeds from companies that are small, that are companies that have the same values that I have as far as growing. So a lot of the American companies have fallen off. I really like the Italian companies, and there's a few American companies that I still purchase from. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm happy to answer any questions or talk about anything that we've looked at. And I have a few things to show you here as far as what I've been doing recently.
Okay, Renato, I have a question on the Q&A. Potatoes planted in March, when are they ready for harvest, and how can you tell?
Okay, so potatoes, you're going to put them in the ground in March, and you're going to see flowers develop on your potatoes. Once you see those flowers, the potatoes are actually about marble sized, and you can harvest them anytime from the time you see the flowers until the plants die back, and they could stay in the ground. There are times when I let the plants die back completely. If I'm going to store them and keep them for the whole year, it's best to allow the potatoes to grow to their full height and then start to die back and then harvest them at that time. So really it's up to you when you want to harvest them. After the flowers emerge, you can start digging in there and you can investigate. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll take a row that looks interesting. I'll just poke around with my fingers and I can see what size they are, and many times I'm harvesting over a long period of time. I'm harvesting as I need potatoes. So it's something that you can investigate and check out in your garden. A company that I like, if you want to purchase potatoes, there's a company I buy potatoes from. They're up in Maine. Let me think. Let's see if I have it. Okay, Wood Prairie Farm. Wood Prairie Farm. It's a mom and pop and I think 3 kids, and they do a beautiful job at producing some really nice seed potatoes. They have some great varieties, and every year I'll order some from them. So I'll change it up and order some things that I haven't grown before. You can try Wood Prairie Farm.
How do you mentioned about storing the seeds. Where do you store them? What do you store them in?
All of my seeds, so here's here's some of the seeds that I've been recently saving. So you can see I always store them in paper envelopes. So I have my pink brandywine, tomatoes.
I can't hear you.
I'm always storing my seeds in paper envelopes. You can see they're in
Oh.
paper envelope, right? I'm going to label them. So you're going to have the variety.
Again, I can't hear you.
Okay. That's the way. How about now?
I don't know. You've gotten off the sir. I can't hear it at all.
Okay. Let's see. How about now? Can you hear me?
Good. Yes.
Okay. So all of the seeds that I'm saving, I'm going to be keeping them in paper envelopes. And that way, if there's any moisture still in the seeds after I dry them, they will not mold up. So I don't put them in plastic bags. And then I'll put them all in a crate, which will be stored in my garage, which is an unheated, insulated garage. What you're really looking for is a cool, dry, dark place. So the basement, probably not a good idea. You know, most Long Island basements are humid and moist. So I would keep them someplace that's cool, dry, and dark. And I just have a big crate in my garage, and I have all of my envelopes stacked in there, and they're organized based on the variety and the year.
Another question, if it can take two. I just wanted to buy some seeds from a company that you find the seeds in the supermarkets or someplace else, and I've had one company, and I grew beautiful tomatoes plants, but not a bud on it, not a flower on it, not a single tomato came from that, and I was so disappointed.
Well, I would be, you know, it's important to start out with a good quality seed. So I would stick with ordering your seeds from companies that are really producing something that's a high quality. So if you wanted to buy your seeds, I can give you a couple of different companies that you could look at, both American and from Europe. So you might want to think about ordering your seeds from one of these companies. So the ones that I like are, in America here, there's Baker's Creek heirloom seeds. There's High Mowing organic seeds. You can try both of those. I really like the Italian company. It's seeds from Italy. So the company from Italy is beautiful. They have, you know, really nice packaging that's hermetically sealed, and you get large quantities of seeds for your money. There's been times when I've ordered seeds from a company, tomato seeds, and literally I'm looking in the package to try to find them because they're giving me 4 or 5 tomato seeds. So the companies that I purchased from Italy, I'm going to get a lot of seeds for my money, and they're all going to be seeds that will germinate. They're all viable seeds. So I would start off that way because the variety is very important. And choosing the right variety, and I would stick with heirloom varieties as opposed to hybrids. There's only one hybrid that I grow every year, and it's because there's no heirloom that I can find that is as good as this one hybrid, and that's, I don't know if you've heard of the Sun Gold cherry tomato. So it's that little, you know, golden cherry tomato that is so sweet and delicious, and I'll usually put 2 or 3 plants like that in my garden, and I know that that's a hybrid, so I'm not going to save the seeds on it, and that's the only hybrid that I end up growing in my garden. Everything else is an heirloom, and so I know I can save the seeds on it. If you try to start the seeds on a hybrid, you're going to get something other than what you originally had. It's going to revert back to one of its original plants, so it's going to look kind of like a medium-sized cherry tomato, and it won't be what you're actually trying to grow.
Okay, Renato, we have another question. To get eggplant seeds large enough, do you basically sacrifice the eggplant?
Yeah, you know, sometimes you have to plant enough to anticipate allowing some of them to grow to their full mature size to save the seeds. So yes, so I always, you know, usually with things like the zucchini and the cucumbers, it just happens that I just miss some in the vines and I don't see them. They get way too big. With the eggplant, I will scope one out or two of them, and I'll say those two are going to be seeds, and I just let them grow to their full mature size, and then I'll save the seeds on them. So, you know, having a space where you can grow a little more with the anticipation of saving the seeds is a good idea.
Okay, another question we have is, how can I ripen butternut squash that came off the vine before turning flesh color?
If you bring it inside, if it's close to being mature and you just bring it inside, it will ripen a bit. So you could put it in. A lot of times I'll take these squash varieties and I will use them as decorations in my home. So they'll be like, you know, I'll take, like, if I'm going to go grab for you the centerpiece that I have on my table right now. I'll show you what I mean. So a lot of times I look for them as art pieces, and if you just allow them to stay indoors, they'll ripen a little bit. But with the squash, I really try to get them to be ripe before I harvest them. That's my goal. So I look at the vine. When I see the vine starting to dry up on the squash, I know it's getting to that place, and I harvest them at that time. So that's my goal. Sometimes they'll ripen a bit more in the house when you bring them in. Are you interested in seeing what's on my table? I can show this to you if you want. Anybody?
Sure, but that will require you to relocate, right?
No, I'm going to go get it right now. It'll just take me 1 second.
Oh,
Hang out
okay.
1 second.
Okay. Yeah,
Can't hear you.
we can't hear you. That's a beautiful pumpkin.
Yeah, so this is the long pumpkin that's sitting on my table.
Can't hear you. Your lips are moving, can't hear a word.
Too heavy. So I'll cut that. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so I took that from the garden the other day, and I'm going to leave it inside. It's going to be on my table for a few weeks, and then eventually it's going to get cut up and become pumpkin pie or get frozen. So you know, so I'll bring the squash in, and you could leave them in. They'll last a long time. Even this giant zucchini that I'm going to save the seeds on can stay for weeks and weeks in my garage before I'm ready to save it.
Okay, another question we have is about your hoop house. Is your entire hoop house dug in, or only that center aisle and 3 feet deep?
Yeah, the center aisle is dug down about 3.5 feet deep. The beds are at waist level. So when I walk in there, I'm walking down into the center aisle, and then the beds are kind of like at my top. So when I'm doing the growing that I'm doing in there, it's mostly the cool weather greens in the wintertime. Everything is at the right shape for me to do the work that I'm doing. So weeding and putting the seeds in and working. So I'm not bending over in the garden, which is another real benefit of doing a dugout style greenhouse. So the greenhouse serves like a few different purposes. It's basically a salad factory during the cool weather months. But then in the summertime, it's where I'll cure the root vegetables like the garlic and the onions. I'll lay them out into the hoop house to get them to dry before I can store them for the entire year. So it serves a couple of different functions.
Okay, one of our viewers has tomato problems. It's not blossom end rot, fungus, or virus. Starts as a black dot on the upper area and quickly becomes a circular moldy area. Automatic watering, soaker holes watering only 30 minutes every other day. Raised beds, could it be a mineral deficit?
What I would look at right away is the moisture. What I do with my tomatoes is So I'm starting out when I'm planting them. A lot of compost is going in the ground. The key to the growing that I do really starts from the soil. The most important thing that I could do in the growing that I do is making my own compost. So that's the first thing I would think about in addressing almost every issue in a garden is what's the condition of the soil. But with tomatoes, one of the tricky things with tomatoes is the watering. And I do all my watering by hand. I have, at some of the, growing areas that I work for, with some of my clients, I'll have automated systems set up, but I'm monitoring those systems because the worst thing that can happen with tomatoes is that they get too much water at that time that they're starting to become ready for harvesting. So what I do with my tomatoes is I stop watering them and give them very little water once the fruit gets to the size that it's about the finished size of the tomato. Not when it starts turning red. I don't even wait that long. When they're still green, I'll stop watering them and really have very little water. Tomatoes don't like surface moisture on the foliage, so I wouldn't have any water watering the leaves of the plants or the fruit that's hanging, and try to keep them as dry as possible. That's usually the what I see when people have issues with tomatoes is there's too much water, later in the season, and the ground and the foliage is wet. If they are going to get watered and they're going to be watered on top, I would make sure that that watering takes place very early in the day to allow the foliage to dry up completely before the nighttime comes, because that's when mold and fungus develops, is when that moisture sits on the fruit and sits on the plants for a long period of time.
Okay, our next question, does one need to look for organic seeds?
I always try to purchase organic everything. That's my first choice. I realize in my life, everything is like I'm starting out, everything's kind of a compromise. So I start out with what's my first choice? My first choice is organic. Of course, I want organic seeds. But there are many times when I'm buying seeds from companies that are reputable companies and they're responsible growers, but they can't put that name organic attached to their product. Maybe they haven't, received the certification, whatever the reason is. And so I'll buy the seeds and then I'm going to make them organic, because after they're grown in my garden for a year and I save them, now they're organic seeds. So I'm not too worried about it as long as I'm buying seeds from reputable companies that are responsible and they're doing the right thing for the environment. I don't worry about it too much. So if you look at the companies, seeds from Italy, as an example, they'll have an organic offering in their catalog, but then they'll have a lot of things that aren't organic. And I'm totally okay with purchasing something that's not organic, knowing that the companies that they're doing business with are, responsible growers, and I'm going to grow them, and they're going to become organic vegetables as a result.
Okay, while we're on the topic of your Italian seed company, can you state and spell the company name so folks can look it up?
Seeds from Italy, and their website is growitalian.com.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is, when do I start zucchini and other squash seeds? And why do my tomatoes crack on the vine?
Okay, I'll handle the tomato question first. Tomatoes are important to be harvested at the right time. So here's I picked one of my Italian heirlooms here. This is called gold medal. It's half yellow and half red on the same tomato. Now, I went and picked this tomato a couple of days ago, and it's been ripening inside my garage. What I do is I'll time my harvest with the weather. So if I see we're going to have a big rain come, I will go out and I'll pick every tomato that is close to being ripe, every single one. because that excess moisture is going to make that tomato crack. The next couple of days, I'll come back and I'll find all of my tomatoes cracked. So timing it with the weather is important when harvesting, and then harvesting them sometimes a little sooner and then allowing them to ripen indoors is a good idea with tomatoes. So now as the zucchini, planting zucchini, I'll plant 3 successions of zucchini. And the way I do it is my first round, I usually start my zucchini seeds directly in the ground in the garden bed. I don't start them in containers and then transplant them because they're very easy to start. Now, when I save the seeds on this one giant zucchini that I have here, I am going to have a whole double handful of seeds that I could then start my zucchini for the following year. And my method has been to overseed the zucchini in the garden bed and then go back at a later time and thin out the ones that have grown that are too close together. So I will take zucchini seeds after I've saved them, I've dried them, I've stored them, and then we come into the summertime once we're looking at May, maybe the beginning of May, the middle of May is probably a good timing depending on the weather. And then I'm going to put my zucchini seeds one every about 4 or 5 inches right down the entire row that I'm planting zucchini. I'm going to keep them moist, allow them to germinate, and then once they germinate, I'm going to go back after they've grown a bit, and I'm going to weed out all of them except having one every, let's say, 20 inches apart, and maybe 2 feet apart sometimes. And so I overseed initially, and then I'll come back and thin them out. Because if I just put one seed in every 2 feet, and for some reason that plant doesn't either germinate or it germinates and some critter really likes to eat those sprouts and eats my seed, well, now I'm right back to where I started and I have to reseed. So overseeding and then thinning is the best method of getting these things started. And I do that with all of the vegetables that I grow like this. So the same thing with the pumpkins. I'll overseed them and I'll come back and I'll thin them out. There was one year, a few years back, where the insects, for some reason, were really aggressive in the beginning of the summer, and they were eating all of my sprouts as they came up. And so I would put my row of zucchini seeds in, and I would come back a couple, 2 or 3 days later, found that they would germinate and something was eating the sprouts. So because I have bags of zucchini seeds, I had no worries. I replugged them all in. This time I put a zucchini seed one every inch apart. And I went down the whole row that way. And yes, they did eat some of them, but they didn't eat all of them. And I was able to get them established and growing, and even though the insects were eating quite a few of them. So that's another benefit to saving your own seeds and having large quantities, is that you don't have to worry, oh, I got this little bag of seeds and I got to make this work. You can have a lot of seeds that you know you're going to be able to get them started and established. So I will put my first succession of zucchini in the ground, the beginning of May, and then I'm going to wait maybe about 3 weeks or so, and I'll put another succession in, and I'll try to just continue that process of waiting another month or so, and then getting another succession in, and that way I can stretch out the growing harvest of the zucchini, so I have them for a longer part of the year.
Okay, our next question is from a patron. 2 years in a row, yellow grape tomato plants simply died off. Leaves turned spotty and yellow and died. Other varieties in the same bed were fine. My sister in North Carolina had the same experience. Your thoughts?
I would bail on the variety. If the other tomatoes, this happened to me. I had somebody give me a variety of tomato they thought was really great. It came from another part of the world, and I tried growing it in my garden, and it just didn't do well. I mean, it didn't do. It was really struggling, and so I would just try a different variety. And that's why it's important when you're growing to always experiment with different varieties and see which ones do best. And the ones that do best are the ones that I'm going to replant for the next year. The other thing that happens when you save your seeds is, you know, things are always evolving and adapting on this planet. And we are, you know, all the living creatures are, and the seeds are as well. So when you save your own seeds from your garden that grew in that microclimate, the following year when you plant them, the seeds that you saved are going to be more adapted to your environment and are going to do better. And that'll get better and better year after year. So, I mean, I've been saving the same varieties of seeds now for over 20 years, some of them. And you know, every year they're doing great and they're doing better because they're genetically adapting to my environment where I live. So I would just not grow that variety again and pick another one. There's so many great tomatoes. A lot of times what I've found is I stick to the ones that are proven, that, you know, people have been growing for years, that I know are good. I had people giving me seeds and they'll tell me, oh, this is something new that came out, and it's a really nice variety. It's a really unique color. And I've grown tomatoes that are purple. I've grown tomatoes that look metallic looking. I've grown all these. Like this year, someone gave me these chocolate pepper plants. And the peppers look like a beautiful dark chocolate color, but to eat it, they're almost tasteless. They have no, they're kind of gritty in the flesh. I mean, they're not at all something that I want to eat, but really beautiful to look at. So I would stay away from things like that, where people have something that looks really nice, and I would focus on the ones that are really proven and stick with the heirloom varieties.
Okay, our next well, it's actually two questions. How long will seeds last in storage? And the other question is it okay to cut back on zucchini growth to contain the plant?
I don't usually cut back the zucchini. Sometimes I do if I see that it's taking over something. I might trim a leaf here and there, but I usually allow them enough space to spread out. I mean, one zucchini plant could take up, you know, a 6-foot radius easily, right? So I usually give them the room to grow. Seeds, as far as the shelf life of seeds, I have seeds that are in my bin that are years old. I mean, maybe, you know, 8-10 years old that are still viable. So tomato seeds will last a long time. Pepper seeds, they'll also have a long shelf life. I have some of them in there that are 5 or 6 years old, and I'll test them to see if they're viable, and they're still viable. And then other seeds don't last so long. So things like carrot seeds are something that I don't save. If I purchase carrot seeds this year, I'm going to be buying new carrot seeds the following year because they don't have a long shelf life, sometimes only a year. Same thing with onions. Onions don't last very long. So, you know, they're tiny little seeds, the carrots and the onions. I don't save them myself. I purchase them, but every year I'm going to purchase them because the time that it takes to do the work, to sow the seeds, to keep them wet, to weed them, and then to have partial germination is really disappointing. You know, the seeds are relatively inexpensive, but our time is not. It takes a lot of work to get them to the place of, you know, where you're going to have something produced. So I don't waste my time on anything that's suspect. So any seeds that I don't think are good, I'm not going to take a chance and waste my time. And if I want to know if they're good, there's a way of testing them. So what you could do is you can take some seeds and you could take a wet, moist paper towel, and you could sprinkle some seeds into the paper towel, fold it over, keep it moist, and put it inside like a plastic Ziploc bag or something like that. Maybe leave it cracked a little bit, and just keep it moist. And then look at your seed variety and see what is the germination time, so how many days till germination, and you keep an eye on that for, like, if it's tomato seeds, you know, 8 or 10 days or 12 days go by. If you don't see them germinating in that paper towel, then they're not viable. If you do see them germinating, then you know they're good and you can use them. It's not a bad idea in the wintertime, before you plan to get started with your summertime and your spring planting, to go through your seeds, see what looks good, what you have, And then if you have any question, you can just test them and check. I save so many seeds now that I don't go through this process any longer, because I literally have bags and bags of tomato seeds and pepper seeds and zucchini. So I have so many that I know I'm going to have enough every year to replant, and enough to give away, and enough to donate. And then as they start to get more, some older ones, I'll just end up, bailing on them, and I'll have the newer ones replace them.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions? You can either type it in or unmute yourself.
Hi, quick question. Do you seal the envelopes?
I just kind of leave them open. So here's like tomato seed. I'll just leave them open, and sometimes what I'll do is I'll just hold them a second time and just keep them like that. And then they'll
okay.
go into my seed bin. Yeah, I'm gonna need them, in
Thank
March.
you.
Yeah, and I keep them and so a cool, dry place is the best place to store them.
Okay, anybody else? All right, well, thank you so much, Renato. Oh, do we have a
Thank
question?
you.
Do we have another question? Oh, I guess not. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Renato. That was so
Thank you.
informative.
Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Can't wait for spring now.
I know. Talking about it's getting me excited. Well, thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right,
Bye
take
now.
care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.